cause and said, hey, this isn't right. So anyway, I just thought I'd add that to that. It was a great letter, but there's all kinds of people have come forward and said, you know what, that's an awesome thing you guys have done. So
yeah, Councillor Kroll.
To Councillor Ladwig's comment about the letter we received in this file, I believe in the last council meeting we sort of skipped over reading file, but there were probably 5 or 6, and you know, I certainly commend Councillor Lumley. Hospice did the hike for hospice, and Councillor Lumley very generously donated door prizes for a raffle. And sadly, I didn't win one, but it was a really good incentive with the door prizes that he offered for people to open their wallets and say, help yourself. So kudos to Councillor Lumley for his generosity as well.
Yeah. Councillor Deidre.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge a letter from Evie Clark thanking the bursary that we provided to her, and just telling her dreams after the 4 years university that she's going to study education, going to travel around the world. I think it's wonderful. I think everybody should, you know, when you live in a single place, and for me it was a great experience because I live in a place and suddenly I moved to another area, even in Brazil, and it's a completely different world. It seems a different language, different cost, like different ways of living. And then, you know, coming back to Canada is another. So I feel in this way very rich because you experience so much in life and you start understanding people. So I'm really glad that she's going to do this, and I think everybody should do. Maybe Carlton.
Good.
Get an adventure like that too. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, we'll have to have a youth counselor conference one day. Get them all back here and find out who's been doing what. It'll be interesting. And then think of that maybe 10 years from now when you got a whole much more pile of and we got our youth counselor training behind Colton there. It's a mascot at least anyway. Yeah. Okay, and that's it for the correspondence. We're going to go on to bylaws, and I'm going to comment that bylaw 10.1 and 10.2, Councillor Lumley, you will not be able to vote on unless our Director of Planning rushed out after 5:30, after 6 o'clock, and wrote an extensive report that you can read before you vote. But otherwise, if you haven't read the report, you did not attend the hearing, you'll be able to observe. So thank you. So that being said, I'll go to Director of Planning just in case she did write that extensive report on the
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't write an extensive report. I did take notes though, and I can provide a verbal report, which is allowed under the Local Government Act. So this one is for 504 South Fletcher. So this is rezoning from the R2 to the RM6. So it increased density from what's currently single family development to up to 5 units. In terms of the written submissions, we received 10 written submissions. 1 was supportive and 9 was opposed. And at the public hearing, we had 5 speakers present at the public hearing. 3 were in opposition, 1 was neutral, and 1 was the applicant. In terms of their comments, the opposing comments were around the units not being affordable, concerns over residential guest accommodation, concerns with parking on South Fletcher and on the lane, and then other concerns around bylaw enforcement, and again, affordable housing and parking. The applicant did speak up and say that their intent was not to have residential guest accommodation, and did reference the new policy that council has adopted, and said that the parking would be on site, and that would be a requirement of the building permit at that point as well. So there is a quick summary of the submissions.
Thank you. So council, there is a recommendation to be given third reading. your own discussion? Is there anything that you heard of that public hearing that you wish to discuss? Councillor Ladwig, then Councillor Kroll.
I was just wondering if the director of planning could elaborate on how the building that is being built on South Fletcher right now is dealing with their parking, and how many, like, I was just trying to think. So this one's potentially could allow 5 apartments, I believe is what it could do. Is that correct?
That's
And
correct.
so in theory, that would be what, 8 parking stalls it would require or something like that. Something along those lines. But in theory, all those stalls could fit on the ground floor of the building, I believe.
Yeah, so we don't have a development proposal for this property yet, but at this point it would have to meet the zoning requirements. So yeah, so if it was an apartment, if it was 5 units, they would have to put in 8 parking spaces on site. If it was a townhouse, I haven't calculated the density there, but say it was 3 townhouse units, there would be 2 parking spaces per townhouse required, so they'd have to put in 6. The property at 524 South Fletcher, they've got 6 on-site parking spaces, and that's for 4 units. So they've met the bylaw requirement.
Yeah, okay. I was taken back a bit or sympathized with comments we heard on the impact on Periwinkle Lane during construction. Like, that's something that it'd be nice if we could somehow manage, because that does sound frustrating. I don't know if there's anything that can be done there.
I think that was just a perfect storm. We lost a bunch of staff in our infrastructure department, and we also had a bylaw officer off during that time. So
No, I'm talking about the actual, like, from my understanding, it was like, I think Periwinkle Lane is being blocked by construction trucks. That was my understanding. Oh, and I see what you're saying. Okay, I get it.
yeah, I mean, typically any work in the highway or in a right of way or during development, we would have staff on site looking at it, getting highway use permits, being in communication, and it started that way until we were very short-staffed, and it affected the neighborhood, unfortunately. But we are recruiting to fill those positions, and I just hope we can get some people, some more staffing.
Right. So hopefully we won't have that experience again. Okay.
Yeah.
As a condition of development, will they be required to put sidewalks on that side of the road as they develop their properties?
I don't remember. Sorry. The acting director of infrastructure might know that, but I don't recall.
Right. Okay. I have a lot of sympathy as well for for what I heard there in terms of not only the parking issues, because regardless of how many parking spaces you have for the tenants, people are going to want to park on the street in front of the building and then walk down or go down instead of getting down the lower floor and coming up. It's going to be a challenge. And I'm very concerned about that parking, as well as the increased traffic for the whole area. It does change the nature of that community. I think that's inevitable. I'm sympathetic, of course, to hearing talks about affordable housing, but I don't think any of those houses along that stretch, on either the high side of the road, the newer builds, or the lower side of the road, the newer builds, are ever going to be affordable housing. I don't think that, I think that's not where affordable housing is going to be built in this community. Those are all going to be expensive. And although there are some older places there now, eventually I believe they'll probably transition as well. However, that being said, I would much prefer to be dealing with this property as part of a plan for the street, as opposed to a one-off spot zoning. And I don't know if there's any way we can do that, because we're going to be faced with these kind of concerns and issues for every parcel Periwinkle Lane. I supported by sympathetic to the people there. I can imagine that when that building below them was built, or the building on Periwinkle was built, it was disruptive as well to the residents who were further down the lane and had no other access other than the lane during that period. But it's a tight spot. It's going to be, simply because of the volume of traffic on there, it almost no longer becomes a lane. It almost becomes more of a road type of location because of the volume of traffic that's going to be there. If you put 6 or 8 parking spaces for this building and you just keep on going down the way, that's going to create a lot of traffic on a dead end lane access. One of my pet peeves with our own staff, and I brought it to attention a number of times, and I know the issue around it, is the brush on the north side, or on the other side, the west side of the street, that grows and pushes people on the road. That is private property owners' responsibility. They're simply not taking care of it. It's not our staff responsibility. It's somebody not looking after their own landscaping, and it pushes people out and pushes people onto the road. And that being said, because of all the cars parked there, we can't get in there. Our staff can't get in there with the proper mowing equipment to cut even edging along the road, between the road and the sidewalk, because of the constant parking. I'm sympathetic to the homeowners. I'd rather see a little bit less density of a project than 5 units. We are going to be going through this for each one of those properties as we go down the street, because they will all come to the table at some point. And that's why I wish we could be doing this as part of a broader rezoning process, saying, okay, here's the plan, and here's how we're going to address all these issues of parking and increased activity, along with what we're going to be doing ourselves at Holland Park, increasing the capacity of the library, and things of that nature. So I'll be interested to hear what others have to say, and I haven't made up my mind yet. I need some time. So, Councillor Crowell or Councillor Ladwig, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. This would be a question for the Director of Planning. Hypothetically speaking, were the bylaw to be passed, because right now the proponent is talking about, what potentially could be done on the property. Would they have to come back to council for the proposal of what they're wanting to build if we approve it?
Yes. So they would have to come forward with a form and character development permit application, and that would be considered by council.
Because I think one of the big concerns that people had that spoke today was the fact they don't know what's going to happen on the property. Talking about, there were people concerned about view corridor and things like that, and it's in the view corridor, so that obviously would be protected. But I sensed there was a lot of fear of the unknown. And I would have much rather seen the zoning application come forward with the proposal for what we would like to put on this property, so people could say, oh, okay, well, that's not so bad. I can live with that, or I can't live with that. But having that unknown quality in there, I think, makes it very challenging. And I fully agree with Mayor Beamish is, I think some of these areas we need to take a look at and avoid this every time we turn around, having to go through public hearings, because we know there's 6 more lots between that and the building that we were just discussing that's about to have occupancy that are probably going to apply for rezoning to do exactly the same thing. So I think there might be some, for future councils to look at, such as we did on Davis Road and Poplar, rezone the whole area. But that's a much bigger dialogue. But I just wanted clarification on that one issue. So thank you.
Councillor Ladwig.
So I support the zoning amendment because it is as written in our OCP. It's the same reason why I didn't support the other project on School Road, because I didn't feel like that proposal reflected the land use designation in the OCP. And I feel like it's important that people that invest in our community, whether it be a homeowner, a developer, or anyone else, can have faith and confidence that council is going to implement the plans and bylaws and policies that we have in place. If we start kind of cherry picking here and there when it applies and when it doesn't, it becomes unpredictable. And right now, this is the OCP that we have. If we don't like this OCP, if we don't like this land use designation, that's legitimate and fair, and we can talk about that, or the next council can talk about that. And I highly recommend the next council do an OCP review. Mm-hmm. But this is what we have in place right now, and people that purchased this property believed that we would implement the plan that's in place right now, and I think we should carry forward with that. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is an interesting conversation because in theory, I agree with Councillor Ladwig. I think in practice, what we are seeing is also unprecedented development, things that perhaps the OCP, when was written, when was the last approval, the last big amendment, right, update that it has, it did not anticipate, because yes, in the OCP, it is anticipated to grow to that scale. But now we have all these areas that everybody is anticipated to work in this scale. We still have the issue of the aquifer, the water. We don't, I know the aquifer is in good condition, but what we have not done yet is to understand, with all the buildings that are, the development permits that have been already approved but not already built, with all the land use, that all these approvals, I'm not confident that by the time we have a whole build out that we're going to be okay. And I remember in a conversation, and actually I would like a clarification, Mayor Beamish, because I remember having this kind of talk with you, and you said, well, we can always dezone, if I don't know if it's the right terminology, if we get to a point that we cannot build anymore. So that would be a surprise as well, if you have a lot for 20 years and now suddenly we are in this water crisis. I think we have unprecedented development, and I totally agree. I actually wrote my press release to the Coast Reporter, and that was exactly the thing that I wrote. I'm really concerned with this thing. So I understand that in theory, we should respect the OCP, but I think there has been lots of unpredicted development that occur. And now we are in stage 3, and the SCRD and Sea Shelter in stage 4, and they keep growing. And to me, we need to. And the impact on the neighborhood, that's another thing, it's huge. And I sympathize when I was actually very favorable, because I was exactly on this line. Well, it's on the OCP, I should approve. And I thought, okay, other people, there was other approvals in this, right, in the same area. But when I hear the neighbors there and the impact that it's causing, I don't feel comfortable. I think it's really unfair for the community. And we have more developments coming, and it puts an incredible pressure, and without really having solutions. So I agree with Mayor Beamish. We need a better planning and look at what's going to be, because we say yes, yes, yes. And then the residents are the ones that have to bear the costs, right, of the impact. So I'm a little bit torn with this situation right now.
Councillor Ladwig.
Personally, I don't see it as being an unfair issue if it's written in a policy that anybody can read and review before they purchase their home. Anytime I buy a piece of property, the first thing I do is go to the OCP and review what's planned around me. How can you complain? It's like me buying a house on Gibsons Way and then complaining about the traffic. It's like, well, I bought there. And so, and my family, we just bought some property out in Area F, and before I bought it, and it's right on it's getting close to industrial land, right? So I made sure that I looked at everything around that lot before I bought it, before I made that decision. And I advise everybody to do that.
Mhm.
If the OCP has said that this is slated for that kind of development, then I personally, if I wasn't comfortable with that, then I would have thought twice about buying there. You're in a very densely zoned area. That's the risk you're running when you buy in that spot. I mean, right now where I'm living, I've got now a tow yard and a pot shop on the other side of me, but I can't complain about that. That's where I am. And so you got to know what you're buying into, or lobby the municipal government to make changes to that. I mean, and I do hear Mayor Beamish about what this means for that laneway, and maybe the zoning needs to change along that strip. Maybe that's a very legitimate planning issue that we should be thinking about. But we didn't make that change before this proposal came in. Deal with this proposal, and then if you think that it needs to change, then make some changes as the next council. But you have a proposal before you with the current land use in the OCP as written. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that I'll call the question on this and see where we stand on this, because this is obviously important to the owners, but important to the neighbors as well, because this is not the first domino to fall in that block, because there's already one down the corner and one inside. But I actually don't object to this kind of development on here. It's how can we manage that development so that it's not disruptive to the neighborhood as the development occurs, and thereafter. I think that the development needs to be of the scale that the land can accommodate, and I think that's what we're talking about here. We're all talking about here. So I'll call the question, and the recommendation is that zoning amendment bylaw number 1065 67 be given third reading. Ask question, all in favor? I'm going to go in favor of it for a lot of the reasons that Councillor Ladwig said, although, and that means it passes. I'll ask for opposed, for anybody opposed. Okay, Councillor D'Andrade, thank you.
Can I speak, Mayor Beamish?
Yeah, you can, but just a sec. I'm not finished speaking yet. But what I would like to do in terms of with staff is ensure that as development occurs in this area, that staff be very rigorous about managing the impacts on others, particularly on Periwinkle Lane, ensuring that the development, the construction, there's always going to be open passage for people, because it's not only for people, it's for emergency vehicles and other things that will occur as development is occurring. The other thing I'd like to take a look at is whether or not we should be looking at doing residential parking only on the west side of the street for residential vehicles only, so that people have a parking permits. It's done exclusively in Vancouver, and we have off-street parking. There's off-street parking beside the school board, there's off-street parking in the library, there's off-street parking in front of the town office. There's lots of off-street parking in areas around and below the town office. People just don't walk that far, including myself, and we all need the exercise. But if we had residential parking only on that street, assuming everybody's got their parking, I mean, all the properties on the above side also have lane access. So assuming they also have parking up there, we should be able to manage that better. And then taking a look at what improvements, normally when development occurs, the development is responsible for improvements to, or contributions towards the cost of future improvements to the midpoint of the road in front of them. And that includes sidewalk, curb, and gutter often. And so extending the sidewalk that already exists and runs down in front of the town office should be an objective to go for the balance of that street. so that people have a safe place to walk along there as well. So those are some of the things that I'd hope that staff would pay attention to as the development occurs there. And so that those are my comments. And Councilor Diendrad?
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to exactly before approval, and perhaps the approval wouldn't be today, or we wouldn't make a decision today, but that staff presents a management plan so the community can be at peace, not the opposite. We approve and then we ask staff to present a management plan. So I prefer the opposite.
That can be done. That
Yeah,
can be done because we don't have to bring this back for approval yet.
Yeah, I would prefer, then we go and check all the issues that the community experienced. If we even need to, well, we heard a lot, perhaps is enough what we heard, but then we have a plan, because I don't think it's fair either, the impact that you have in the community.
Yeah. So that can be done, where staff would come back and provide another report of how these impacts could be mitigated around the property area, anticipating that more properties are going to develop. And many zonings stay at third reading until such time as other things are done, and that can happen. So we've got third reading. It's not, doesn't indicate final approval. That's still one more hurdle to go. Councilor Diendrad?
Yeah, may I bring this as a resolution and that we can vote right now?
You can.
Yes, so
And your resolution is?
everything you said about presenting a management plan to address all the issues. Because that's exactly, I was in this line, no, we need to present a solution before approving. I think it should be the opposite, right? Then we are respecting community and the owner as well, because I'm sure the owner wants to be in good stand with the community. So
Yeah, I'm fair with that. I mean, I don't know if the owner is chomping at the bit to tear down their house and build another one, what their time frame is. So having a report come forward prior to final approval. CIO?
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just a bit of a clarification. Could you give a bit of information about what you mean by a management plan? Is it because other than the rezoning, we don't have a project yet? So sort of pieces like the sidewalk connection and management of construction, those are typically once we receive a development application, which we don't have just yet. One suggestion is that you pass a separate motion that at the time of considering these developments, these matters also be considered. There would be another suggestion to get some bit more immediate action there.
That could be appropriate as well, that just going on record as saying we share the community's concerns and that these things should be addressed. And council would want to see those be addressed. So are you prepared, Councilor Diendrad, to make that resolution?
yes.
Okay, so, and it is things such as parking, sidewalk or boulevard sidewalk improvements, and particularly the management of construction and development relative to Periwinkle Lane and the impact down there. So if is somebody prepared to second that? Councilor Ladwig has seconded that. And I think that's a good way to go. So I'll call the question that. All in favor? And Councilor Lumley, you can vote on that. Okay, all right. Okay, so thank you. Councilor Diendrad again.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the lack of maintenance from one of the neighbors, the lack of maintenance of their property. Is there, can the town find these people? I mean, it's the obligation of the owner, or do something about it. Again, it's not fair.
It's not fair. And if you walk along that block, which I do frequently, that you are pushed away by the landscaping. And it is actually one of our more unsightly sections of road and sidewalk, because there's a lot of grass material growing up between the asphalt and the curb, between the curb and the sidewalk, and between the sidewalk and the concrete retaining wall, and then coming over the wall from buildings. Have a walk on it and then bring that back. Councilor Ladwig?
What if we simply wrote a letter to those homeowners and just simply asked them
Yeah.
maintain it. It's surprising what just a letter, just simply requesting could do.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Director of Planning?
I can follow up with our bylaw enforcement officer
Yeah.
on that matter.
It would be
Yeah,
nice
and
to
we
do
would
that,
do-
and yeah, and I appreciate it's being staff issues. I know that when previous director of operations was here, he and I had a conversation, and he did get out there last fall and get some trimming done, and it was Daniel, and get some cleanup done along there, but it grows back, and when the cars stay parked there, and some of those cars don't move very often. When they stay parked there, the grass grows around them. You can see it. Okay. CIO?
Through Mr. Mayor, just for what it's worth, the issues with the lanes aren't unique to Periwinkle Lane.
Yes.
Be it drainage, be it loose rock, it's a big concern because at least half of the lane is on a slope. And we've had the lane just above, just below Sargent, forgot the name of it now at the moment. A few years back, we had quite a few houses under construction, and we had similar issues. You see it on Abs Road.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we had a sort of quite a number of homes being reconstructed or redeveloped, and that created a bit of a situation. So we're trying to improve our road management and permitting, and a lot of those folks have highway use permits and are trying to follow the rules. But we sort of, it's a combination of various issues there, and I don't want to just to be associated. It's not just a matter of new development. It's all of it in some ways, chasing different matters. But thank you.
Appreciate that, and I think that it's something that I think people begin to expect more of as our taxes go up, and I think that people do look and say, "Oh, what am I getting?" So yeah.
The good news is on Periwinkle in the larger development there, they're almost done. We're going to do a final inspection there on Thursday, so I think hopefully we can leave a quieter lane in the next couple of weeks here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. We will go on to the next one, and this is 509, the bylaw amendment 1065-69 regarding 609 Glen Road, and the recommendation that be given third reading. And again, that was the presentation night. And Director of Planning, would you like to weigh in on this?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Beamish. So with this one, this is to reduce the lot size from 555 square meters to 500 square meters so that they can subdivide the property in half. We received 5 written submissions. 2 were in support, 2 were opposed, and 1 was neutral. And at the public hearing, 2 presenters spoke to the public hearing. Both stated they were in support of the zoning amendment, but they were concerned of the use, so they wanted to make sure it was just for single family and not for any more density. And they also did discuss concerns with parking, but the bylaw itself just allows single family on those 2 proposed lots, so that should settle some of the concerns.
Good, thank you. Somebody want to weigh in on this one, Councilor Deirdre?
Yeah, I am supportive because I think especially in the past, there were 2 lots and that's okay. But I like the idea of whether a covenant associated with this, that, that the height is not going to change, the setbacks, because I can anticipate in the future, time pass by and people come back and say, well, now I need to build a house, I need to change the setbacks. Maybe the lot coverage for this area, my understanding is 50%. Perhaps people come and say, well, I need 56, 50, 60 or something. And I think, again, for the peace of mind of the neighborhood, which already had some impacts, which my understanding should not have happened in the first place with other lots. So I would be supportive, but with a covenant attached that doesn't allow variance on height, setbacks, parking, and lot coverage. If this is possible.
I'm going to speak against that. I don't agree that, I think this is a straight rezoning application. That they have the right to rezone when they want to develop, and if they want to change the setbacks, if they want to change the height, they've got to come back to council, and council that day will make that decision. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to kind of assume that they are not going to be good neighbors, and that we see that everybody has a right to ask for a variance for a same. I would be surprised if every property there on Heritage Hills, old and new, has the full 2 parking spaces required on site, and because there's quite a bit of street parking on that area, so that I think it would be probably just. I don't think it's necessary. I think we have mechanisms in our bylaws to allow people to ask for a variance, and at that time, council can consider the variance. And if there's a valid reason for it, council will give it. If there's not a valid reason, council won't give it. I don't think we have to put a covenant on a property and say you'll never ask for a variance, or you'll never ask for a height over height. I think that is incumbent on council today to manage that process. So I don't think we need to do that. Personally, it probably doesn't exist on any one of your houses. Councillor Ladwig?
I think I agree with you, Mayor Beamish. Like, I part of me is like, oh, I lean a little towards Councillor DeAndrade, but at the end of the day, we do have a process in place. Yeah. Like, variances are supposed to be sort of exceptional circumstances anyways. And so they would have to apply, they would have to go through that whole process. Yeah. The example that was referred to by an individual that attended the meeting, I know exactly what house they're talking about, and I fully agree. I have no idea how that house got approved. I hope it never happens again, but it is the exception, not the norm. And I think for us to be putting extra restrictions on other landowners because of one exception, I don't think is fair either. So I'm with Mayor Beamish on that particular issue. And with regard to the parking, having actually lived in that house and on that lot, I'm not actually worried about it, because there's actually a very nice little ledge, unlike a lot of the properties on Glen Avenue, that can easily take the parking spots required for those houses. So it's actually quite a nice little area to park down at the bottom. So I think there's plenty of parking space.
Councillor DeAndrade?
Yeah, my concern, I understand the rationale of not having a covenant, but there's a request for subdivision. This is a single lot, and there's a request for subdivision, not on the size that it is required. So now we are talking about 50 square meters of loss in the lot. And that's my concern, because once we approve, and then, yeah, that's okay to say, well, the next council, but we can also ask, how did another council allow this house, the other house? And I don't know, again, why cannot we do this? Can we not protect the neighborhood right now that we are giving the subdivision? Why not?
If they apply for a variance, as you know, the neighborhoods will have the opportunity to speak to it and to speak to council, so that it's just one of those things of saying that we think you're going to ask for variance in the future, so we're going to say no now. And I don't think we need to do that. It also encumbers the property, and I don't think we should be doing that either. Councillor Crowell, you want to say something?
No, I was just going to suggest that we call the question on this. I agree with you that, you know, it's properties are too easily encumbered with covenants that, you know, cause all sorts of other repercussions. We have a procedure in place for people applying for variances if there's a valid reason for them. So, it was 2 lots of the size that they're asking for. So I would like you to call the question, sir.
So we need a mover and a seconder, I think. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Ladwig. Okay, see no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? All in favor, thank you. Yeah, and I think we got to be awfully careful about how we encumber people's property when there is process going forward. The only way they can build beyond the allowable limits is to come back to council, and the neighbors have to be notified, and that conversation will be had. And I think that's fair. That's what that process is there for. And I was interested the other day that the new owners of my property, I met them for the first time, and they were over, and there's an easement in favor of our neighbors onto our property, and they hadn't been aware of that when I don't know why they wouldn't have been aware of it. That's up to their lawyer. But they were asking questions about this easement. What does this easement mean? Sort of thing. Basically, I think it has allowed the neighbor that had old house, old place, too close to the property line, needed access to the side of the house, and they pushed an easement out onto our property. It doesn't impact us. But suddenly that became a concern for them, that there was this other encumbrance on the property that was something that they hadn't anticipated or hadn't been aware of. And that can happen when you're going through on properties. People say, "Oh, dude, you got this covenant on your property. What's that all about?" What do you mean? What do you mean I can't do that? So that I would be just cautious, and I don't think maybe some of the speakers tonight have not gone through that process. Maybe some have, but I think that the process is fair. Council has responded fairly, I believe, to the variance process, and I think that we'll count on future councils to do the same. No, I think we're there. Okay, so that was approved. We're going to go to the Director of Planning again for the zoning amendment bylaw number 106564 for 757 School Road. That was back for us. I'm going to turn my lights on.
Thank you, Mayor. So this one was a rezoning that went to a public hearing, and this was for 757 School Road. They are rezoning from a single family zone to an RM3 zone, which allows for a much higher density. It had an FSR limitation in that zone. So it allowed, what they were asking for were for 16 units in a residential building. After the public hearing, council passed a motion, passed a resolution requesting the development to have a maximum density of 75 units per hectare, which equates to 9 units. And council did not support a further reduction in parking. And council asked that this feedback be feedback from the developer be brought back to council. So I shared the council resolution with the architect who's working with the developer on this project, and he presented revised plans to me on August 10th. So he has reduced the density to 75 units per hectare, which are 9 units in the residential building now. He's shared updated drawings, and they've got new floor plans, and he's also revised the CAC offer. So initially with 16 units, he was proposing 70,000 for the community amenity contribution, and now with the 9 units, he's proposing 35,000 as the CAC offer. The units in the revised plan are 3 2-bedroom units and 6 3-bedroom plus den units, so for a total of 9. Overall, the development looks very similar. There are some very minor form and character changes, so I'll just share my screen and point those out to council. The form and character development permit has already been authorized by council subject to zoning approval. So here's the image of the proposal that was approved by council. Can you see my screen? Just to make sure. Okay, thanks. So the top image was approved by council. And because of the change in floor plan layouts, he's done some minor revisions. So you can see here the windows are different and very, it's hard to tell, but the suite separations are not shown anymore. More windows, and the layout of the balconies have changed very slightly. This image is the view from O'Shea Road. The top was the original that was approved, and you can see here the windows are a little bit different in the revised plan, and the separations, the suite separations are taken out as well. And then in this picture here, this is the perspective from School Road. The top is what was approved, and what's changed are the windows again and the balcony layout. So those are the minor changes to form and character, which I don't see as a big change, but they have met council's request to reduce the density, and the staff recommendation is to give the bylaw third reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have to reapprove the form of character, or is it the change of the overall appearances? I agree, is very, very similar.
Yeah.
That looks good.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, there's no requirement to change, to
Okay.
reapprove the form of character. It's already been approved.
The only question I had, and it's probably one that I just don't understand what I'm reading, and I'm going to go to attachment F on page 76 of the agenda, which is the bylaw. And the B, 2B2, 2B2A, 2B2A, and refers to 0.1 parking spaces per unit. What does that mean?
That was the amendment that applies to supported housing across the street. So they had a parking relaxation. And so when drafting this bylaw, because initially we presented it with a parking reduction for the 16 units.
Yes.
We had the two properties with their parking reduction. So that doesn't change, that doesn't apply to this property, basically.
Doesn't apply to this property. Okay.
No,
So it's
it
just, okay.
applies to supported housing across the street.
Just the one across the street. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that would change. Councilor Diandrad, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question regarding the temporary visitors bicycle parking stall. I know before with 16, or they had to have 4, and they presented 2, so they were short 2. What will be the new requirements for temporary visitors bike parking stalls? Sorry. I didn't see anything written, yeah.
Yeah, they have met it. I have to zoom in. It's written on one of the attachments.
I didn't read. I couldn't read. I couldn't find. But it could be somewhere.
I'm gonna try and find, oh, there it is. So they are required 12 stalls, and they are proposing the 12 stalls.
Are you talking about the permanent ones? I'm talking about the temporary.
Oh, the temporary. Is it 2 stalls required? Sorry, I have to check my bylaw here.
Councilor Crowell, go ahead while she's looking.
On their parking plan, they've got 12 parking stalls within the building, and they've got an additional 4 in a loading zone exterior parking.
Oh, okay.
And that's on the parking plan on page 67 of the agenda. And the bike stalls is 2, 4, 6. There's adequate bike, and I think there was a motion that in addition, bike rack be added exterior for visitors.
Sorry, I'm just looking at definitions here.
Sorry, Mayor Beamish, just a clarification. What page,
Oh, okay.
Councilor Crowe?
67.
60.
So they've got two, they're required to put in 2 temporary bike stalls or short-term bike parking stalls. And they have put 2 in. So they've met the bylaw requirements for short-term and long-term bicycle parking and vehicle parking
Thank you.
and loading.
Okay, council, what's your wish? I mean, this was a challenging process, but I appreciate that the owner has gone back and has made changes. Councilor Ladwig?
Sorry, not to be a stick in the mud, but I'm picking up what you're laying down, Mayor Beamish, about the bylaw, the way it's written. It doesn't make sense to me either. So maybe Director of Planning can explain it to me.
That's all right, yeah. When I read it, I was confused too about that part, so.
I can just go through the bylaw. How about that?
Like, I'm wondering if it just needs to be reworded, because right now it doesn't sound like because we said earlier it's what is it for apartments again? 1.5 per apartment or whatever our bylaw is on parking.
I've just shared my screen here and I just pulled the bylaw up.
Would you mind
So-
expanding that just a little bit?
Pardon?
Would you mind expanding it just a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. So it talks about amending the bylaw here. So you're altering the maximum height. So basically what the zone says right now. Let me just pull up the zone. We're clarifying the language with this zoning amendment. So the maximum height in the bylaw as written today says the maximum height of buildings is the lesser of 3 stories and 11.5 meters. So what we're doing here is we're saying, except as otherwise required by Part 5, so the view protection, a principal building in the RM3 zone must not exceed a building height of 11.5 meters. So we're not saying the lesser of 3 stories or 11.5 because 11.5 is just more clear basically to a developer. So that's that part. 2B, replacing the required off-street parking with off-street parking and loading spaces must be provided and maintained as required by Part 6. Part 6 is all the parking requirements in the zoning bylaw. So we're saying all lots have to meet Part 6. Notwithstanding Part 6 of this bylaw, the minimum parking space requirements for Lot 1, Block 1, District Lot 686, and Plan 9933, which that's the supported housing property, that they had a site-specific rezoning. So for that property, they have a parking reduction. So right now, like the parking as written is 1.5 parking spaces per unit is the requirement, but because supported housing got a parking reduction, this was in here. And then this part was rewritten because we were going to initially add a parking reduction for this property, which is 757 School Road. What I'm highlighting here is the legal description. But because we took that out, none of this really applies. Like we could delete this entire section of the bylaw. It's not going to change how it applies to this property because that is already written in the bylaw. We were just cleaning it up because there were going to be more than one property having a parking reduction.
Right.
So
I would personally be more comfortable if it was just all gone because it is, as layman, like
sure.
that it is confusing.
Okay. Yeah.
They have to meet the bylaw. They have to meet the parking bylaw is what we're saying. Yeah. So let's just eliminate all that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just read this again one more time. Okay, so what we've done here, okay, no, I'm gonna backtrack on that a little bit. What we originally had was a parking reduction for the supported housing use, which is this. We don't specify a parking requirement for any other use. So when we drafted this bylaw, we added this requirement that all off-street parking and loading spaces must meet the parking requirements in Part 6. So we should keep it. Sorry about that.
Can we keep that and just get rid of the Part 2? Like just ignore all that? Just say you got to meet
Yeah.
the requirements in Part 6?
No, because what we've done here is this Part 2 is already in there. We're just numbering it with 1 and 2. So this Part 2 is already in the bylaw. We're adding Part 1.
Right.
So it doesn't apply. I mean, this part applies to the property. It has to meet the parking requirements.
Right. That's too bad. It's just for the layman, like person that doesn't know the legal speak, it's confusing.
Yeah. And then did you understand this part down here? Do you want me to go through the rest of it?
Sure, why not?
So the density here, what we're doing is we're adding a density provision. Right now, the density has a maximum floor space ratio of 1.2. And we're adding this provision here, notwithstanding above, on this property, so 757 School Road, the maximum density is 75 units per hectare. So it's written into the zone and limits that density there. So that was the amendment. So we took out the parking reduction. We added the density, the maximum density provision. And the rest is the same. So changing the zone from R2 to RM3 and then renumbering as necessary.
Okay.
Okay, so what are your wishes, Council?
I'll move it.
Moved Councillor Ladwig, second by Councillor Lumley. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. You know, I don't want to say it was the best solution because we actually lost units, but at the same time, I think that it is a better solution for that particular point of the neighborhood. And I think that's, you know, as we talked about the projects preceding us on South Fletcher, we have to be concerned about how we're impacting the neighborhood on some of these projects. And I think that that this is one. I again don't think these were intended to be, or we had no indication, let me put it that way, that these were affordable housing units. So that's, they are going to be nine units, and they'll probably be very nice ones. Okay. Thank you, Council, for that. And that brings us to the back end of this agenda. We do have another meeting, an in-camera meeting to follow this. So remind Council. What am I missing here? Oh, we've got, we've got permissive tax exemptions. And I'll bet you our Director of Finance has been just sitting through this all night, waiting for this. I mean, it's too bad she doesn't have the pull that some other people do to get their projects earlier in the agenda. So let's go there. Director of Finance, is there anything you wish to say about the report? The report's being received, so anything you wish to say about the bylaw before we approve it?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to provide a brief summary for council, that this is an amendment to bylaw 1273, and it incorporates the changes that council requested to reflect the addition of 100% exemption for Rule 389.005, and that is the property on Harmony Lane / Franklin Road that is run by the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society that provides affordable housing on that property. This one is an amendment, is just for the 1 year, and that amends the full bylaw to keep the timing consistent with the original bylaw, which was for 4 years. And so this would provide the exemptions for the previously granted properties, as well as this new one for the 2023 taxation year. And then the next full evaluation of applications will be in the fall of 2023, which matches the first term of the first year of the new council. And that would be for the 2024 year. We're always a bit a year ahead for this process. So we do, as part of the requirements of the charter, we do have the ad scheduled for September 9th and September 16th. And this allows community an opportunity to provide some feedback, advertises what the bylaw is going to be doing, and they can provide feedback to council prior to the adoption of the bylaw. And so first readings being presented tonight, then there's the ads, second and third proposed for September 20th, with adoption for October 4th, and that is still within the current council's term. And that also meets the deadline for the permissive tax exemption bylaw, which is October 31st. And so that's what I have for you tonight.
Thank you, Director. Council, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Someone, any further discussion, or somebody wish to move it? Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Ladwig. Any further discussion on this? Can I ask all in favor? Opposed? Yeah, I'm going to join Councillor Lumley on this as well. I'm more in favor of the permissive exemption on the affordable units. I think that's the principle, and not on the market unit. But it's going forward, and that's fine. Talk about it and see. It's one of those things that I think that we've got to be should be fairly rigorous about. And
I got the property for $1, so
yeah.
You know what, it's like,
yeah,
you have to, like, the affordable housing, they have to work within their budget. I get it, but their budget should include that. It's not our fault that they didn't work that into their budget. So that's why I'm voting against it.
This will come back, and we'll have that discussion. Will be advertised, so we'll see through there. And you know, we're just talking about, yeah, I understand the need to support affordable housing society as well, certainly. And there are other ways we can do it. We could grant them those taxes in another way if we chose to. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the inquiries. Final inquiry. Oh, which I should say, I'm not aware of any old business or any other business coming up. Get my no unfinished, no new, no notice of motion. We will go to inquiries. Oh, Councillor Kroll, you have a question? Inquiry.
I wanted to make a notice of motion.
Okay, you have a written.
Pretty much. What I would like to see is that in a timely manner, realizing a lot of the confusion that's come up around the new regulation with guest accommodation, that staff, when possible, hold a sort of a public hearing meeting, just to provide one source to answer questions with respect to the new bylaw. There seems to be a lot of confusion in the community. There's letters going around with all sorts of misinformation. And I think if we can provide one stream of information to the people involved, that it would pour some oil on troubled waters. So I realize staff have a lot on their plate, but I would like that if this could happen in a timely manner.
Yeah, okay. That's your. Could you write that motion and provide it to the corporate officer? I understand what you're saying, but should be written. Yeah, Councillor Lumley.
Well, we have a like a director of communications. I mean, do we have to make this motion? Like, is it not, like, has the town not put out communication regarding the new bylaw, like with No? Like,
There is
is that what
information. out there
you're
for-
asking for? Because I would only assume that once the bylaw is created, Elizabeth would have sent out like on the website, would have said, hey, here's a new bylaw, and this is kind of like that, you know, she does with those pictures and stuff, and goes, hey, you know, this is the new bylaw, and like, make sure you do this, and make sure that didn't happen. I'm just asking. I'm curious, right? I don't have an STR, so.
There seems to be a lot of confusion around it and misinformation. So I've
Well,
just
there
a
will
workshop
always-
would,
There will always be people painting their own picture with respect to bylaws. It happened with the tree bylaw, it happened with everybody else. I can only assume that the town has communicated this to the public, is it not? Like, I mean, that's why you have a communications person, right?
Councillor Ludwig?
I was just gonna ask you to stop clicking your pen.
Oh, sorry. Okay. How'd you know it was me?
Because I know you after 4 years. That's
Corporate officer. You can do it. You can do it. There.
I must have clicked it 10 times. It wouldn't do it. There is a web page on the town's website devoted to the residential guest accommodation, and it says in brackets short-term rentals. If you simply go on the website and use the search and type in guest accommodation, you will see there is quite a bit of information there. There is a learn how to apply to operate a residential guest accommodation link. There is background, there is a summary of the RGA regulations with a frequently asked question sheet. And there is a copy of the policy in full available and a list of definitions. So take a look at it. If you want, I can email you the link to it so you can take a look, and perhaps there's something there we could improve on it somehow. Perhaps there's something missing that would help.
just to recap, I'm quite aware of the length and breadth that staff have gone to make this clear, and it's simple for people to understand. But it does seem that there's information coming from various sources that people are misinterpreting, and I just felt that if there was a workshop, that if people could attend the workshop, it would just be one source giving the information, and it would be clear information from the town.
Director of Planning, you were going to say something, and you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just going to add some of the work we've done for pushing out information, and it's through social media and letters to residents and letters to the operators. But I was just going to add to Rebecca's comments, or the corporate office comments.
I think Councillor Crowell, if you write your motion, I mean, I heard you also say public hearing, and that wouldn't be appropriate.
No, just a
so
workshop.
Yeah, you want to be very clear as to what it is you're asking for as a motion, and then the timing of such. A recommendation, it would be after November to do something like that. And we are not doing enforcement on the bylaw by agreement until 2023, so that there will be questions, and I think that every time a question comes in is an opportunity to build a better Q&A. You know, it's one of those things that people ask a question, they're given an answer, that should go on the Q&A, because that could be other people's questions. So, Councillor Deandrad?
Well, I'm surprised because I thought that the report was really well written. I understood everything. I don't have the short-term rental, and I think it's super clear. I think what's happening, people are busy and they don't want to read, and they wanted someone to tell them, because I cannot see what's really, and I don't understand if they have any issue, why they don't send an email to town. I mean, with a specific question, that would be, I think, the best way to go about it. I mean, I think people have the obligation to put some efforts to understand a bylaw. I mean, the tree bylaw is way more complicated in a way. And I don't know, I'm surprised because I thought the reports were excellent, so.
Oh, Councilor Crowell, again, I just encourage you to write your notice of
Yeah,
motion.
no, I will. And it's no reflection on staff. I totally agree. As complicated as the issue is, I think staff did an excellent job. But I just thought it might be simpler than, rather than 400 emails coming in from various sources, that one workshop would eliminate a lot of the sort of responding to individual emails on the part of staff.
Okay, thank you. We'll look for that information. We'll go to inquiries then. I'm conscious now of the time. It's 10 to 9. So. Rebecca, do you have any corporate officer?
Mayor Beamish, we do have someone with their hand up. Judith Bonkoff is joining you.
Welcome, Judith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I think I know the answer, but I am not allowed to comment right now, I think, on this this Glen Road thing anymore, because it's already in process. Am I right?
That's correct. We have
Okay.
not given a final approval.
Okay. Okay. Just, because I approved it, but now I don't if I can't have restrictions. The other thing is, one more thing I did mention, and this is going to be a general question. This isn't about Glen. This is just about how do we encourage people to have suites as opposed to B&Bs? How do we, somehow make it more, easier or more desirable than doing the whole B&B thing? Because if there's suites going in these units, darn well they're going to be probably B&Bs. And it is so, we need affordable housing so badly that, there's got to be a way that we can offer incentives to people when they put in suites. That's all. I'll let you go. Sorry for the long evening.
I think council has discussed that in the past, and I think they'll come up with some solutions.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
it's important. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I see no further hands raised, Mayor Beamish.
I'm sorry, corporate officer, I didn't quite hear that.
Sorry, I see no further hands raised.
Okay. Okay, and then we can, we're going to take a motion to close from council. We have a in-camera session, and it is under, if anybody's taking notes, section 91 A, B, E, and 92C of the community charter. Personal information is about identifiable information that's been considered for a position. Personal information about the identifiable person who has been considered for a municipal award. The acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land, if council considers disclosure could be expected to harm the interest. And a matter that's being investigated under the Ombudsman Act, which the municipality has been notified under section 14 of the quarterly report. Yep. Okay, that's why we're going to go in camera. So that to all of you, I say good night and thank you very much for sharing with us again tonight. And Colton, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing great things about your year and to helping council find your replacement. That's going to be the next critical step in the process. And we usually do that sometime in that October period, so that keep your eye out for a good candidate who is dynamic and wants to work with council and wants to take over your job, because that's what you're going to be doing.
Yes, I'll be on that soon.
Great, thank you. Corporate officer?
Yes, I didn't catch it. Did we have a mover or a seconder for the motion to close?
No, we don't. I know you can't do it. Moved by Councilor Andrade, seconded by Councilor Ladwig. All in favor of closing? Thank you. All right, we'll see you in a few minutes.